Should media literacy be a human right? Let's find out from a panel of experts. Mr. Alexandre Voci, the co-chair of International Steering Committee of UNESCO GAPMIL, and Ms. Sherri Culver, the co-vice chair of the International Steering Committee of UNESCO GAPMIL. Our moderator, Professor Joel M. Jacob, will introduce our panelists in length. Mr. Joel M. Jacob is an assistant professor in the Department of Media Studies, Christ deemed to be University. He loves teaching, is a journalist at heart, a storyteller by passion. He enjoys researching media literacy, ethno-specific communication patterns, leadership communication, and films. In the classroom, he facilitates courses in digital and strategic storytelling, multimedia journalism, reporting, editing, and scripting, documentary production, and intercultural communication. But more importantly, he facilitates fun and friendship among his students. Besides this, he enjoys dressing up in costume, singing, looking for everyday wow moments, playing music, good food, drama, and football. I'm certain this is a wow moment for you, sir.
Thank you, Meenu. That was a nice introduction. Just to set things in context, I will introduce our guests in detail in a bit, just to set things in context about what this whole discussion is all about. Should media literacy be a human right? So when we talk about human rights, we need to understand it's the very concept of what a human right is. A right is a power or a permission or an entitlement given to do something. The notion of rights is usually set by an oligarchy, by an elite group, maybe a group of people, and is enforced on people. And a group of people also decide what the rights are for us. So that's one side of the discussion. But when you look at what human rights are all about, they are basic rights or freedoms that we all should enjoy as human beings, from birth to death. It's based upon shared values like fairness, dignity, independence, respect, equality, and can never be taken away, but they can be restricted reasonably. So these are some of the discussions that I hope would come in. The UN Declaration of Human Rights that was adopted in 1948 lists about 30 articles, of which Article 19 states that everybody has the right to freedom of opinion and expression. So what does that entail? So if we have the freedom of expression, that means we also have the freedom or the right to access the information. But how many people have the ability to access that? That also means that we have the ability to critically, or the right to critically analyze the information. So how many people have the ability to do that? We also have the ability to create media messages. So to exercise all these different human rights, we need to have an environment or some conditions created to enable it. But we have a lot of divisions in our world. We have a digital divide. We have divisions based on race. We have divisions based on caste. We have divisions based on gender, economy, politics, and all these different problems. So I hope that through our discussion, we can address some of this and how UNESCO GAPMIL is playing a big role in trying to bridge all these different gaps and try and make the whole world media and information literate and build those competencies. So like I said, we've got two passionate leaders of media literacy here. Alexandre is a journalist who interestingly focuses on human rights. He's an educator and specializes in media literacy. He's the director of Zeitgeist, an international consultancy company on education and media, and also serves as the international co-chair of UNESCO's led initiative GAPMIL. He is a columnist at a Gazeta do Povo newspaper and Edu Cacao magazine. He also dabbles in television, where he hosts the show Idade Media, the first one in Brazil on media literacy issues. And on YouTube, he coordinates the Mediamundo channel. We will be talking a little bit about that as well. He is also coordinator of the advisory board of Educa Media program at the Palabra Aberta Institute as a google.org initiative and member of the scientific board of Comunica magazine from the University of Huelva, Spain. He's co-founder and member of the board of the Brazilian Association of MIL Professionals. He's been part of the Innovation Program Post-Graduation Initiative of the University of California, Berkeley, and he's currently a researcher on AI and ethics at the Pontifical Catholic University of Sao Paulo. So over to you, Alexandre, and
thank you very much for this kind introduction. To say that media and information literacy is a concept created by UNESCO that merged two different fields. One is media literacy, which came from the communication science and field. So MIL is an acronym from media and information literacy, and that's what GAPMIL is all about. When you ask us, is media literacy, should media literacy be a human right? I think it is already. We need to consider it on the nation's laws, and we need to consider it in our speech on universities as part of maybe the fourth generation of human rights. The first generation, of course, was focused on the civil and the political rights, and based all of human rights are based on the French Revolution. So the first generation is based on the freedom, mainly on the individual freedom. The second generation comes later on, basic mainly with the first one. They were officialized in 1947, the declaration that you mentioned before, Professor Jacob, with the socio-economic and cultural rights. And the third, and some authors consider a fourth generation, and other authors that consider even a fifth, a sixth, and a seventh generation, and they are growing up. But until the third generation, it's unanimous that all the authors consider that we have three generations. The fourth, there are some contradictions here. Some of them they consider democracy, information, and pluralism, for example, fourth generation. What's on the table here is that we don't need to make it so bureaucratic to consider it as a human right. We need to make it a human right in our practices, in our laws, in our public policies. Under the MIL umbrella concept in GAPMIL, we can consider a lot of other concepts and practices. It's a very large concept. And if you can check each one of this that are here in my presentation, you can see there are a human right base that maybe can embrace it, or some of them that consider this point here. For example, you should take internet and private policies. You have the human right to keep your private life under your business. So when you talk about internet and laws and private social rights, you need to debate and to check what kind of policy your country, your city has with the data you make available on internet. Cinema, audio, visual education, freedom of expression, freedom of press, ICT and ethics, artificial intelligence, media literacy, science literacy, which is very important, news literacy, cyber culture. So all these issues that are underneath or under the MIL umbrella concept, they are connected to some human rights that already exist themselves. So it's important for us, there are students, researchers, professors, or professionals of media, professionals of education, of libraries, of public policy makers. We need to combine these items with the human rights that we have already in our laws or on the Human Rights Declaration. Zeitgeist by John Herder, which was that German philosopher from the last 18th century, the last years of the 18th century, they said Zeitgeist is the spirit of time. So we need to embrace the spirit of time. The real art just breathes the spirit of their time. So what's the spirit of our time? This is classic art, represents the body. This is medieval art that represents the conflict between God and the human things. Renaissance art that represents, but when you cross the line of the modernism, you start to lose yourself in what's the spirit of our time, because you have everything at the same time. MIL is a good tool to access things right, to interpret things right, and to produce information in a right and ethic way. So there's something to do with this model, classical model of communication, that we are living this model nowadays. We are prosumers, we are production and also consuming data and information. So MIL has to do with this change here that we are living. And we are living this. I like to use this both image because they are not only dealing with the communication system, but even to the educational system. Professor Joe, probably up to the 80s, you start with one professor teaching the same content for the whole group of students. Nowadays, you can personalize uh, the process of learning to each student's demands, or in the way that each student can learn better, by films, by games, by lectures, by discussions. That's what AI and communications can do, even in school. So this is a mindset model that changed, not only communication model that changed. And that's what MIL is all about. So I used to say it's a dilemma Gutenberg-Zuckerberg, because Gutenberg, when he created the press, he created this system to press, for example, one Bible in one language for all the people. But Zuckerberg contributes to this kind of environment. And in German, it's cool because Gutenberg in German means the good mountain. And Zuckerberg in German means the sugar mountain. And you know, when it rains, sometimes the sugar melts. So that's what's happened with Zuckerberg sometimes nowadays. But this is a good dilemma we are living. This is a UNESCO definition of MIL that came from, it's a new concept that merged two fields, media literacy and information literacy, and is connected to the role and functions of media and other information providers that encourage us to process basic skills to analyze and use media information for self-expression, to become independent learners, critical thinkers. I like to underline the expression critical thinking, and to be part of the professional, the governance, and also the democratic process of their societies. If you check it out, some words here in this definition, they are completely connected to human rights, like democracy is part of the third and the fourth generation of the human rights, and critical thinking is one thing that the education world, they mention a lot, this expression of critical thinking, which is the base. It's one of the base of the public school all around the world, to develop critical thinking the students. But actually, people do not investigate or go deeper on this thinking. If you are living online, both online and offline, critical thinking, it's a concept that was born really before. The P of GAPMIL is very important, because the P is for partnerships. I think what GAPMIL is all about is to really increase and enhance the partnerships with a multi-stakeholder group, where we are 700 members right now, almost 700. When you think about laws, when you think about MIL, the education laws has more emphasis on the skills of MIL than other areas. It indicates that we need to upgrade a little bit the legislation on MIL skills related to internet rights, private access to data, and this kind of thing. As Mr. Jacob said in the first beginning, I'm with this TV show at Canal Futura. That's the first MIL Brazilian show on television. But I have this internet YouTube channel called Mediamundo, which means media world. and Idade Media means media ages, medium ages. It's a joke with media age and medium ages, middle ages. Sorry, middle ages and media age. And media world, it's media world that we are conducting by, but it's only in Portuguese by now. We are trying, but in YouTube you can put the subtitles in English. I like to stop by here.
Thank you, Alexandre. Sherri, this is your time, and let me do a little introduction of Sherri here. Sherri Hope Culver serves as director of the Center for Media and Information Literacy at Temple University, where she is an associate professor in the Klein College of Media and Communication. Sherri serves as vice chair of the UNESCO Media and Information Literacy Alliance, which is GAPMIL, and regularly presents internationally on media literacy and children's media topics. She's currently serving as project manager for an international research project on media literacy. And Sherri's publications include authoring a chapter in the latest edition of 20 Questions About Youth and the Media. She's the co-author of the State of Media Literacy, a report published by the National Association for Media Literacy Education. She's the producer and host of the popular podcast Kids Talk Media. So over to you, Sherri, and let's hear your thoughts on should media literacy and information literacy be a human right?
Thank you, Dr. Jacob. So to me, the question about human rights is really about the world we want to live in. What kind of world do we want to live in? I won't go through those definitions. I think it's really valuable, Dr. Jacob, that you started by talking about what we mean by human rights, because when human rights tend to be they feel very personal. They feel very connected to things that matter to us, and we define them in ways that are around the things that matter to us. So I also think an important distinction about human rights is, luckily, we don't have an overarching global ruler. So there's no one who can say that if these are human rights, we're going to make sure that they are happening, that they are implemented. And you've touched on that, Alex touched on that as well. Human rights is the statement. Whether it is actually happening and how it's happening is quite different depending on where in the world we're looking at. So including those rights, the bottom part just says life and liberty, freedom from slavery and torture, freedom of opinion and expression, the right to work, education, right? So many more things that are very different in different parts of the world, even though we might call them all human rights. And that Universal Declaration of Human Rights outlines all of those, as you mentioned. So here to me is like the essence of this question. Is when I think about human rights and I think about existing as a fully functioning human in your community, in your town, in your country, in the world as a global citizen. Today, in the 21st century, you need media to be able to be a fully realized citizen. You cannot access, so each of these things I could go into detail about. Especially right now with the pandemic, to access education, you need to be online. And even in a place that other parts of the world might look at the United States and think, well, certainly everyone in the United States will be able to get online and do their education online. Not so. And so in actually having the pandemic and having all of the educational needs move to an online environment really shined a light on the disparity between the people that are able to access their education online and the people who are not. So that's one piece. And we know that even when we all, are happily waiting for the time when there is greater health around the pandemic and all sorts of areas going forward, there probably will be a greater reliance on online education than there ever has before going forward because of what we've learned during this time. So can you, first of all, get online to be able to access education? Do you know how to use it once you're on? I'm using Zoom in my classes now. All of my classes this semester are online. Some students are very facile. They can go into break rooms. They can add their names on things. They can share their screen. Other students are much more intimidated, even though they might be completely comfortable with social media. So having access to education and being able to really thrive in that. Healthcare is another area. And in all of these cases, things have shifted with the pandemic. I'm really talking pre-pandemic in a lot of ways. Access to healthcare, so if there's something, we know that if there's something that people think that is the matter with them from their health, the first thing they do now is go online and do a search about it. Now, you may not get the best information there, but you have access to information. We know that young people who their bodies are changing and they are sometimes embarrassed of asking questions. They want to access health information online where they can ask the questions that they have. So being able to access doctors, we know that in rural areas, being able to access a specialist from another part of the world is a possibility when you can access your healthcare online. Therapists, social workers are speaking to people about mental health issues that they might have online. So accessing your healthcare is not just about accessing the information, but really accessing the actual healthcare. Register to vote. So we're not quite to the point where we are actually voting online, although it would seem that that is certainly where we're headed. But to register to vote, you very often need to be able to do that online. So in many places in the world, even though there may be a paper way to do it, there is usually a bias toward being able to access the information online. Even now, sometimes you'll make a phone call to someone and you get a recording that says all the information you need is online. Really, don't stay on the phone. Go online and do that and get back in touch with us if you have a problem. So registering to vote, not to mention accessing information about candidates, is all online now. That's where you're going to find that. Applications for a job. Yes, you can walk into a store and you can maybe get a piece of paper if there's a place specifically that you want to apply and it's local. But depending on where you're looking for a job, and especially in a time where unemployment is high and people are looking maybe beyond their immediate environment for jobs, they need to be able to do that online. In addition to which, many jobs are actually taking place online. So you have to be able to get online to apply and then get online to be able to do the job. News and information, breaking news and information, that's all online. So that can be, and I say online, right? That could be through your social media, that could be through television, that could be in the online environment. News and information is all happening through media. Assembly for peaceful protest. I specifically wrote for peaceful protest because we know that there are non-peaceful protests, extremist, radical meetings that can happen as well. And there are emotional reactions to that. But how about just the peaceful protest? Not the people that you might be worried about gathering and finding each other, but the people that want to gather and meet to have some, to bring an issue to light and be able to do that in a peaceful way. That's happening online. That's happening through social media. And there's lots of examples of that. And then the last one that I have on here is about the global marketplace. So not everything is what I was going to say is not everything is about money, although sometimes I do feel like everything is about money. I have been known to say to my students many times, if we're in class and I ask a question, because I teach courses often about the business of media, and I say, if I ask a question and you don't know the answer, you could pretty much always raise your hand and go, money? And that would almost always be one of the answers for it. So we live in a very capitalist, certainly I'm in a capitalist country for sure. We live in a very capitalist environment in many, many places in the world. And more being able to have a thriving business means having some sort of global connection, whether it's selling your goods and services globally, which is all happening online, or being able to find customers or find manufacturers that are going to help you to do your business. All that happens online. So when I think about all of that, right, when I look at the 21st century and that vital components of everyday life are mediated by digital media, by technology, by the internet, and in order to accomplish all of those actions, to do any of these things, you really need to have media literacy skills, right? You need to understand how you're going to access it, analyze it, evaluate, create it, and then use it to accomplish the needs you have. For all of those reasons, to me, it absolutely means that media literacy is a human right. And I'll tell you a personal story in that for most of the time, or for my early years, let's say, of being involved with media literacy, I didn't understand media literacy as a human right at all. I really saw it as very connected to individuals, how individuals were consuming media, or how the institutions of media and the media companies were involved. And then I went to a conference once and I heard someone speak who talked about it as a human right. And I was like, completely eye-opening. How had I not considered that when it's so obvious that in order to live in a full and complete way in the world today means having access to the internet? And we think about places in the poorest of countries where where they have mobile phones, right? They're relying often on mobile devices, mobile phones, or they've got laptops. The laptop. I'm thinking about how the generating of electricity for laptops and charging laptops. That's been something that folks have tried to assist in places that are the poorest parts of the world, so that they can get online. That is often seen as the way to help your life, better your environment, better your situation, help your family. To have all of that be a reality and not see it as a human right is ignoring the honest truth of the situation. Without media literacy, without media and information literacy, you're going to have increased misinformation because people are not able to effectively determine what is misinformation. You have less educated citizens if they can't get online for education, fewer job candidates if they can't apply online, more likely to have rampant propaganda, unchecked fake news, misleading healthcare guidance. We've seen quite a bit of that in the pandemic. Persistent cyberbullying, increased surveillance. So surveillance and data mining is happening, but the more we understand media literacy, media and information literacy, the more, and we can get online, we can make more effective decisions about that. You'll have decreased citizen participation in society overall, a lack of awareness of ethical responsibilities. That's a key piece of this. A devaluing of diversity, equity, and inclusion, because we're not seeing the world if you're not online. You don't have access to that without the media. And online extremism and radicalization becomes more normalized. So there are real dangers to not having a citizenry that is media and information literate. Actually, a quote of Alton's from a publication that GAPMIL published a couple of years ago was, media can directly or indirectly challenge or give validation because of its inherent power to transmit compelling messages, to influence and normalize certain opinions, beliefs, and social practices, and reinforce various narratives. Sometimes that can be a peaceful protest, a Black Lives Matter protest, and sometimes that can be the emotional conveying of information. Those are just as compelling images. They can be just as provocative. They can move us to action. This is the framework that that UNESCO has put together about knowledge societies. And I just wanted to flag one piece of it. So the point I'm putting here is that a knowledge society is a media literate society. And the reason for that is, the part on the side here that says each principle directly connects to media and information literacy, there are 4 key principles of knowledge societies: freedom of expression, universal access, sort of a recognition and inclusion around diversity, and access to education for all. And in the world we live in today, all 4 of those things, you need to have access to media and be media literate to be able to fully participate in all of those areas. And that's why I would see it as a human right. This is a book that was published in 2016. This is the yearbook from, there's a university collaboration that I'm involved with at UNESCO. It's called, well, I'm not gonna go no more acronyms. It's the Millid Yearbook. You can actually go online and search for this title. This book is completely available as a free PDF download. It's all about MIL and human rights. There are individual articles in there, very compelling, and from all over the world, different parts of the world. So I would highly recommend this if someone wants to continue the dialogue and see what some of the output of GAPMIL and the Millid Group are. This is something that I think is worth taking a look at. I'm just going to skip that. So I'll leave my presentation at that.
Okay, so just a final statement from both of you.
There are, years ago, there were developed 5 key questions of media literacy. And I have often felt like if I could just wave my magic wand and have everyone in the world just know the 5 key questions, if that was all you got, that would help us move so much closer to having media and information literate citizenry across the globe.
Okay, Alex.
For me, there's one thing that's important. Remember that we are eagles, but we are swallow birds as well on this. So we need to be together and to create alliances and to create pools and to spread the word as a group, as a network, or as an alliance. It should be a local alliance or should be a global alliance as GAPMIL. But it's important to remember that in some point we are not eagles all the time. We need to be swallow birds as well. So we depend on each other, and it's solidarity as also as a human right, as a 4th generation human rights, actually as the 3rd generation human right.
Thank you so much, Alexandre, Sherri.
Thank you, Professor Alexandre, and thank you, Professor Sherri, for that enriching conversation. It really reinforced the importance of having media and information competencies, which in turn enables us individuals to have access to education, healthcare, employment, self-expression, and the global market. Thank you, Joel sir, for moderating this session seamlessly.